What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto waking up in a Tokyo haunted by demons? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto. The boy in question jerked his head up from the desk and quickly wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth. If you're just going to sleep while you're here, why do you come at all? Sorry, Iruka-sensei. I'm just tired today. You say that every day. Maybe I'm tired every day. Iruka decided to ignore that last remark, and continued with the lecture on genjutsu. Some of the students snickered at the blonde boy. Iruka wasn't kidding when he said Naruto did this every day. In fact, Naruto seemed to sleep in class more and more often. Iruka's screeching only kept him awake for about 5 minutes this time. Naruto. Naruto looked up upon hearing his name. What? He asked wearily, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He glanced around. Iruka and he were alone. Is it time for recess? Naruto asked, still only half awake. School's out. Oh. Standing up and stretching, Naruto began to gather his things. Is there something you want to talk about? No. Alright. But how do you expect to graduate in the exam tomorrow? I don't think you've been awake for more than 10 minutes at a time. Have you been practicing your ninjutsu at home? Naruto didn't seem to hear anything. Goodbye, Iruka-sensei. He slowly walked out the door, dragging his bag behind him. No one really cares, thought Naruto. Iruka might, but everyone else hates me. I don't know why I go to school, really. I guess it's a habit by now. I hear people talk about suicide, but that would hurt. Maybe not as much as the pie of being alone, but… Naruto arrived at his rundown apartment and opened the door. He never bothered to lock it. Anything he had of value had already been stolen or destroyed by kids, and sometimes even adults, who hated him for reasons he couldn't think of. He had stopped his pranking a year ago. All it did was get him in more trouble, and incite more people to break into his apartment. I don't know if I want to go to the exam tomorrow. Iruka-sensei's right, I haven't paid any attention. But I guess it doesn't really matter. It's not like I've ever been able to do any ninjutsu right, and no one will practice taijutsu with me. And I don't understand genjutsu at all. Naruto dropped his stuff by the door, closed it, and fell onto the nearby couch, which the previous owners had left. Probably because it wasn't worth hauling it to the landfill. Naruto knew why he slept so often. Nothing hurts when you're asleep. Everything is calm. He was asleep before he hit the couch. Naruto woke up. He hated waking up. He had to come back to reality, where almost everyone he knew, and many he didn't know, hated him with a passion. He glanced at the analog clock hanging lopsided on the wall. 8 o'clock. I guess I might as well try the exam, since I'm already awake. And even if I don't pass, which I probably won't, I can at least use enough energy to get tired enough to sleep. Naruto arrived at the school around 9 o'clock, having taken his time eating in breakfast and getting there. He looked at the camera as the man took his picture. He waited. When it was his turn, he stepped into the room. He saw 3 men sitting at the far end of the rectangular room, behind a table, each with clipboards, paper, and pencils. He recognized Iruka in the middle, but knew only that the other 2 were staff somewhere at the academy. Stand over there, said the one on the right, gesturing toward an X, marked about 10 feet in front of the table. Naruto did as he was told. Now, I want you to make at least 3 clones of yourself using the replication technique, the man continued. You will be graded on their likeness to yourself. Their transparency. Can malformed clones be transparent? I think so, and, of course, on whether you get at least 3. You may proceed when you are ready. Naruto formed the seal and molded his chakra. 2 clones appeared. One was non-transparent, but its face was a bit off. The second was pale white and was barely visible because it was so transparent. The 3 men frowned. The man on the right, who apparently did all the talking, said, I'm sorry. Better luck next year. Naruto slowly walked out of the second door of the room, going outside. He began to walk to his house. I remember the guy on the right, now, Naruto thought whimsically. He was the guy who moved here from another village. No wonder he was so polite. Because there's no way any of the teachers other than Iruka would be that nice, since they grew up here. But why do all the adults who grew up here hate me? That guy moved here before I quit doing pranks, but he doesn't hate me. Maybe something else I did, but what? Oh well, it doesn't matter. As he was walking home, a man in an alley just to the side of the road whispered, Hey kid, come here. I want to talk to you. Naruto glanced at the man. The guy had white hair, a chunin outfit and huge shuriken on his back. He seemed about Iruka's age. Naruto didn't recognize him from anywhere. Why would I want to do that? I know that your teachers are all hard on you, and that no one will practice with you. Without anyone to help you, you haven't been able to get any better. I'm willing to train you, if you want. Naruto tried to suppress it, but he still felt a little hope. Maybe this guy isn't like the others. Maybe he saw how they treated me, and sees how I haven't done anything to deserve it. Maybe. Okay. Quote. The man grinned. Alright, by the way, my name is Mizuki. I know you're Naruto. Anyway, since you're a bit behind, we're going to have to do some advanced training. I need you to get a scroll from this place for me. They won't let us have it if we ask, because they all hate you, but if you can get it, I can use it to teach you more quickly. Mizuki quickly explained which scroll he needed and where to get it. Meet me north of here at the abandoned shack in the forest at, say, 9 o'clock tonight. Sound good? Naruto nodded. Great, see you then. Mizuki walked off, pleased with the success of his plan so far. Because of the way the villagers treated the boy, this was almost too easy. Naruto couldn't believe it. Someone cares enough to offer to train me. And to do so when it could get him in trouble. There's no way I can pass this up, Naruto thought as he snuck into the guarded building. If there was one thing he was good at, it was staying hidden. He had learned this from countless times of running from others, either because of some prank he pulled, or because of the unknown reason everyone hated him. Got it. Now all I have to do is meet Mizuki-sensei at the shack, in, let's see, an hour. I think I'll just head there now and read it for a bit before he shows up. Naruto sat in the clearing in front of the shack. He had taught himself the shadow replication technique, which was surprisingly easy, since he couldn't do the supposedly easier replication technique, but this next one was hard. This village needs to get better security, he mused as he continued reading the scroll. I waltzed right in there and took this scroll without any problem, and I'm not even a genin. Oh well, it worked out for me, so, whatever. Hey, where are my goggles? I must have left them at home when I was getting ready. Whatever. The Sandame strolled the halls of the same building Naruto thought needed better security. He walked here every night before he went to bed. It was relaxing. Every night he came for a walk. Every night he counted all 43 scrolls arranged along the walls. 23, 24. It was peaceful here. No one guarded this building because that might arouse suspicion about the allegedly mundane scrolls it contained. This way, no one would know of the scroll, scroll 37, he remembered, the scroll of forbidden techniques. 31, 32. No one would bother stealing a scroll of stuff that could be found almost anywhere. And no one knew where it was, except for him and a few others. 36, 37. The Sandame froze. The scroll was gone. He rushed towards the nearest exit to sound the alarm, when he noticed a pair of goggles lying by the doorway. Naruto, why would you do this? And how did you know which one it was? Or did you? You must find Naruto and the scroll, and bring them to me immediately. Yes, Hokage-sama, the hastily gathered ninja shouted in unison, before sprinting in every direction. Naruto turned his head toward the rustling of bushes. Mizuki stood about 20 feet behind him. Right on time. Hey, Naruto. Mizuki-sensei. Here, let me see that scroll. Naruto stood up to give it to him when suddenly, he heard another voice. Don't give it to him, Naruto. Iruka leapt into the clearing, landing between Mizuki and Naruto. What? Why? Naruto managed. Was Iruka one of the ones who wished to hold him back? Mizuki was just using you to get that scroll. It is the scroll of forbidden techniques. But Mizuki? An evil grin spread over Mizuki's face. Indeed, how could anyone like you? Did you really think that I was going to train you? I hate you, and so does everyone else in the village. Even your precious Iruka-sensei. Iruka looked about to deny this, but Mizuki continued. I bet no one bothered to tell you, since it would be against the law. The law that was made when you were born. What law? I haven't heard of any law. Of course not. The law goes like this. No one can tell you about the law. And no one can tell you that the Kyuubi no Kitsune is sealed in you. That's why everyone hates you. The Kyuubi killed over half of the village's population. Everyone lost at least one family member. Iruka lost both of his parents. And everyone can see the proof of the Kyuubi's presence in you, every time they see the whisker marks on your cheeks. Did you really think that any birthmark could be so outrageous? But you bought it. What a loser. You're not getting away with that scroll, Iruka said. What? You're going to stop me? Ha, I'll take care of the demon brat, then I'll take care of you. With that, Mizuki hurled one of his shurikens straight at Naruto, who had moved from behind Iruka to better hear Mizuki. Naruto knew he couldn't dodge it. He was too shocked by what he just heard to react that quickly to an attack. He closed his eyes, waiting for the pain. The pain that would end all of his pain. The crunching sound? Naruto opened his eyes. In front of him stood Iruka facing him, with a pained look on his face. Iruka turned to face Mizuki, although he seemed barely able to stand. Then Naruto saw why. The giant shuriken was embedded in Iruka's back. Don't listen to him, Naruto. Iruka gasped. I don't hate you. You didn't do anything. Now go. Get away before what? Mizuki gloated. Before I finish you off? You just gave up any chance you had of beating me. Now that scroll is as good as mine. Mizuki hurled his second giant shuriken at them. Naruto could only stare as it hurtled toward Iruka and him. But Iruka spun around and pushed Naruto out of the way, only to be decapitated by the shuriken. Naruto stared at what used to be his sensei. Iruka had been killed, the only person who had ever cared about him, the only one who ever listened to him. Rage boiled up inside of him. He killed Iruka's sensei. To tell the truth, Naruto, I'm feeling generous today. If you'll give me that scroll, I'll let you live. Then I'll be on my way. You'll be on your way, all right. To hell, Naruto screamed. He picked up the shuriken that had killed Iruka. He killed Iruka sensei. Mass shadow replication. 100 clones appeared, surrounding Mizuki. Each one held a shuriken. This is your last chance. Mizuki screamed in terror, hoping against hope that the boy would give up. Maniacal laughter burst from the Narutos. Mizuki watched in horror as every clone pulled back their shuriken. Time to die, Mizuki-sensei. Mizuki saw only shuriken, and then he saw nothing at all. Meanwhile, the ninja returned to the Sandame to report their findings. All except Iruka. Where's Iruka? Didn't he go to check north in the forest? Someone go find him. 5 ninjas sped off to the forest. The 5 ninjas were stunned at what they saw. A headless Iruka. A bloody pile of shuriken that hid the remains of a body, if the severed hand was any clue. And there was Naruto, lying on the ground, with a blank look in his eyes, muttering something to himself under his breath. The ninja approached the child, uncertain as to whether he had done all this or not. Naruto stood up. One of the ninjas would later swear that the boy's eyes were lifeless holes that sucked the energy from the air around him. The lead ninja gestured for Naruto to follow them. He did, in a stiff, mechanical fashion, that made them wonder if he were a puppet. When Naruto was close enough, they could hear what he was saying. He killed Iruka-sensei. He killed Iruka-sensei. He killed Iruka-sensei. He killed Iruka-sensei. The Sandame had prepared himself to give a stern lecture to Naruto, but when he saw him, he couldn't bring himself to say it. After he calmed down, Naruto explained what had happened. Although most of the ninjas in the room were too used to hating him show any sympathy, they saw the pain that Naruto went through every day. They thought he deserved it. Sarutobi decided that there was no need for punishment, and, though many ninjas disagreed, no one dared to gainsay the Hokage. Naruto went back to his house and collapsed on the bed. No one cares about me, thought Naruto. The only person who ever showed any flicker of kindness was Iruka, and now he's gone. I trusted Mizuki, and he used me for his own gain. No one cares. Naruto drifted into a darkness deeper than sleep. It was unexpected, but he would accept it however it came. It was like watching someone at the Hokage's desk, running everything, getting up and leaving. No one was in control. Could it be possible? Could he have a moment of freedom from his accursed prison? He took control and opened the eyes, now his eyes, and saw the ceiling of Naruto's room. He glanced at the bedstand. He was in control. The brat had vanished somehow, at least for the moment. There was no way he would pass up this opportunity. Kyuubi tested Naruto's legs. His legs. They moved. He tried his arms. They also moved at his will. He stood up, and promptly fell over. Those humans make it look so easy. He crawled to his hands and knees. He slowly got to his feet. He stood. This takes more concentration than it should. I guess I'll have to get used to it. Now for walking. Kyuubi walked to the end of the small room and back. After he got the hang of it, He put clothing on the floor to make it more realistic. After he mastered this, he practiced jumping, which was far harder than he thought at first. He was practicing running through the halls covered with clothing and balls and stuff, when the sun rose. That took a long time. What should I do now? I could finish destroying Konoha. But I should see if I can use my powers in this body first. I'll go to one of the furthest training areas and make sure of what I can do in this body. With that in mind, Kyuubi laughed and stepped towards the door. Mwahahaha. Kyuubi stopped dead in his tracks. My voice. I don't sound like Naruto at all. I sound like the voice of doom. Like me, I could just dash for the training area, but if someone saw me, and if I couldn't access my power. Drat. To practice his voice, Kyuubi decided to see if he was moving his mouth incorrectly. He went into the restroom and turned on the light, only to notice another problem. His eyes. His blood-red, slitted eyes. Well, that doesn't look suspicious. What can I do about my eyes? Genjutsu. Even if Naruto had not, Kyuubi had paid attention to the classes, because there was nothing else to do. Not that he minded or anything. So, I concentrate on what I want to disguise, mold the chakra. He molded his chakra. His vision glowed blue, and voila. His eyes were now purple. I'm going to have to work on that. Wait, I used Naruto's chakra. How on earth did I do that? Well, I guess since I'm using his body. I need to practice hand seals and human techniques, and Naruto's voice, and fix my eyes. And what is this feeling in my stomach? Damn humans and their need for food. And their need for water. And restrooms. The mighty Kyuubi, sitting on the crapper. I hate humans. Several hours later, Kyuubi had gotten his mastery of seals beyond what Naruto had before. Did he ever even try? He had practiced a few techniques to make sure he could use Naruto's chakra well. He had softened his voice enough to sound like he had gone through puberty overnight and gotten a cold. The voice still needs a bit of work, but it's acceptable, for now. And his eyes looked only a shade darker than Naruto's. But if someone with any skill looked at them, they would tell there was a genjutsu, though they wouldn't be able to see my eyes. But I need to test my power. I can't go through this with only a human's pathetic power. Suddenly he heard a knocking on the front door. His first instinct was to shoot a giant fireball at it, but then he remembered that he didn't want to show his power without testing its effects on this frail human body. Kyuubi walked to his front door and opened it. "Hello, Naruto," said the Sandame. "I realize that you are probably still grieving for Iruka, who? Oh, the brat sensei. But I wanted to let you know that, since you mastered the shadow replication, I think that you are skilled enough to be a genin. I would like to present you with your forehead protector." Thanks. You will need to come to a meeting in 2 days, where the graduates will be divided into their teams. It will be in classroom 100C. Good luck. The Sandame turned and walked away. Dang, I need to get this voice problem fixed. But first, to test my power. If I can use all of my power, I won't need to worry about imitating Naruto. With that thought, Kyuubi strode towards the training grounds. It looks like he's going to train. It's very unlike him, but it is to our advantage. We will get rid of the demon brat once and for all. The group of 15 villagers followed silently after what they assumed to be Naruto. Kyuubi arrived at the training grounds. Now what should I use as a target? Why are so many villagers coming this way? They are following me to torment Naruto. They will make good target practice. Kyuubi summoned up his own chakra. To his surprise, it came out of the seal with almost no resistance, although summoning it broke the genjutsu on his eyes. He would have to fix it later. His chakra poured though the seal. The Yondaime wasn't as thorough as he thought. We have you now, demon boy. You can't go. The man was unable to continue after his throat was ripped out. Time to die, little humans. Mwahahaha. It felt good to kill again. It had been years since his last kill, and so even these pathetic villagers were good sport. But my chakra was deteriorating Naruto's. My body. My regenerative boost made up for it, but at this rate, I won't be able to summon a quarter of my full power without dying in minutes. There has to be some way to regenerate faster or protect this body, or to control my chakra outside of the body to keep it from harming the body in the first place. I will have to use it only in small amounts until I can find a way around it. And I think I'm going to have to replace this genjutsu every time I use my chakra for other than healing this body. That's going to be a pain. Having found out what he needed to, Kyuubi headed back to Naruto's house. I need to practice this voice, anyway. Kyuubi managed to adjust his voice, although he noticed that any attempt to disguise his identity was useless if he tried to use any of his demonic chakra outside of Naruto's body. He found that he did not need sleep, as his regenerative effects on his body were more than enough to compensate for sleep deprivation's effects. Except for the bags under the eyes, but they weren't important. Kyuubi walked into classroom 100C. No one seemed to notice him. They were busy talking among themselves. Not a single person glanced at him, though he heard a few wonder out loud at how Naruto could have passed the exam. Kyuubi was glad that Naruto had never been popular, because now no one should be able to tell the difference. He was a little curious as to where the kid had gone. He could feel a presence in the back of his mind, but it didn't respond to any of his attempts to rouse it. Perhaps that was just as well. In a few minutes, the Chunin who had presided over the exam entered the room. He set his coffee on the desk, but held on to the clipboard which Kyuubi assumed to be the list of teams. Everyone, quiet. I will be dividing you into teams, and, the Chunin paused as two more boys sauntered into the room. One was fat and held a bag of potato chips. The other had his hair in a short ponytail. They took seats in the back of the room, and the pony-shouldered boy seemed to instantly fall asleep. Nice of you to join us, Shikamaru, Choji. As I was saying, after I divide you into teams, you will be leaving with your team leaders, who should be arriving shortly. Team 1. Kyuubi tuned out the instructor. He would wait until he heard Naruto's name. There was no point in knowing what teams these pathetic humans were on. Until I find a way to use most or all of my power, I'm going to have to rely on Naruto's abilities. I can only fight with up to a quarter of my power, and that only for a few minutes. If I can get this body to be fast enough, though, a quarter could be sufficient. But still. Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke. The pink-haired girl on one side of a black-haired boy jumped up with a squeal of delight, while the blonde one on the other side wailed with despair. How strange. Your Junin leader will be Hitaki Kakashi. That concludes the list. Is there anyone who was not called? Good. You may leave with your instructors whenever they arrive. Everyone got up and began to leave. Everyone except Team 7. The pink-haired genin who Kyuubi understood to be Haruno Sakura began to complain. Where is Kakashi-sensei? He better not be late. But I guess I get to be alone with, She blushed furiously, darting a glance at the scowling, raven-haired boy. Kyuubi was about to ask if he didn't count as a person, but thought better of it. The less I speak, the fewer chances I take of being recognized. I guess if we have to wait here, I can let this body sleep, since I can't really train here. Sasuke saw Naruto slump onto the table. What a doby. I don't know how he managed to stay awake for the team divisions, but I knew it couldn't last long. He smirked. Fine with me. I don't need his help. We'll do just fine as long as he stays out of the way. But, how did he pass? I heard that he failed the exam. Whatever. I don't care. Hey, Sasuke, maybe after we meet the instructor, we could eat lunch together. No. Sakura looked crestfallen. But we're going to be on the same team, so we need to get to know each other, and so I thought that. Then have lunch with Naruto. Don't be ridiculous. I might as well eat with a rock. Then eat with a rock. There's no need to be so rude. Sakura whirled around so Sasuke wouldn't see the tears gathering in her eyes. 2 hours later, the door to their left opened, and a white-haired Junin calmly strode into the room. He had both of his hands in his pockets, and his left eye was covered by a sagging forehead protector. The rest of his face from the bridge of his nose down was obscured by a mask. Sorry I'm late, guys. I got lost on the way here. What a pathetic excuse. You live here, have you no shame? Sakura's outburst woke Kyuubi and stirred Sasuke from his brooding. I take it that you are Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke stated. Yes I am. Meet me on the roof. We'll talk more when you all get there. Kakashi disappeared in a cloud of smoke and leaves. What are we waiting for? Let's go. Sakura ran outside. Kyuubi followed slowly, and Sasuke followed even more slowly. This is a bad sign, thought Sasuke. Kakashi watched as the pink-haired girl jumped up to the roof quickly, followed by the two, obviously lazier, boys. If they plan to be that lazy during the bell exercise, they are in for a surprise. Sakura sat down right in front of him, smiling. Sasuke walked over and sat on her right, scowling at some inner thought. Naruto sat behind and to the left of Sakura, and stared at the roof. Naruto doesn't seem very confident in himself. He won't even look me in the eye. We'll have to work on that. Sasuke is no doubt contemplating revenge. Well, as long as he doesn't do anything rash about it, he should be okay. Kakashi kept these thoughts to himself. Alright, everyone. I am your Junin instructor. Let's take turns telling each other our names, things you like, hobbies, dreams, and stuff like that. Why don't you go first, sensei, and show us what you mean? Asked Sakura, wanting to know more about their strangely attired sensei. Sasuke was glad she asked, as he also wanted to know about Kakashi, but didn't want to ask. Of course, he expressed no gratitude to Sakura. Gratitude was for weaklings. He couldn't be weak. He was an avenger. Kyuubi just sat there, and continued staring at the roof. I bet this human would notice the genjutsu on my eyes if I looked up. Maybe he'll assume Naruto is just depressed or something, and I won't have to look at him, Kyuubi thought. Very well. My name, as you probably know, is Hitaki Kakashi. My hobbies are, I like certain things. I dream about different stuff, yeah. You go next, Sakura. All we really learned was his name, Sakura whispered to her teammates. They both ignored her. A little miffed, Sakura said out loud, my name is Haruno Sakura. I like. She glanced at Sasuke and blushed. My hobbies are talking with friends and picking flowers. My dream is to be a great ninja and marry a nice guy, and… Again, she glanced at Sasuke and blushed. You go next, Sasuke, Kakashi said, sounding bored. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like being strong and respected. My hobby is training. My dream is to kill a certain man. Just as I suspected, thought Kakashi. Naruto, you're up. Kyuubi continued plumbing the depths of the roofing tile in front of him. He couldn't risk looking up. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I can't believe I almost told them my actual name. That would be an embarrassing way to be found out. I like ramen? It sounded like a question. I should have paid more attention to the kit before now. My hobby is sleeping, I guess. My dream, I dunno. And to think this is the kid who used to shout about becoming Hokage. I didn't know the villagers were so mean. Or maybe Iruka's death was hard on him. But I can't go easy on him just because of that. Good. We'll meet tomorrow at training area 7 at 6 a.m. Don't eat breakfast. Why? Asked Sakura. Because you'd throw up. Kakashi vanished in a cloud of smoke. So, would you like to eat lunch with me, Sasuke? No. Why? I'm busy. Oh. Sasuke walked to the edge of the roof and dropped to the ground before continuing towards his house. Sakura followed him. Sasuke? Is it okay if I walk with you for a while? Whatever. Sakura smiled, while inner Sakura babbled about true love and such things. Kyuubi waited until they were out of sight. Once he was sure they were gone, he ran to what he now referred to as his training area. He needed to build speed to make up for his lack of power. And he touched the tree at the far east end of the training area, and began sprinting back to the west end. The sun was just beginning to peek from behind the horizon, casting his elongated shadow ahead of him. As he ran, he jumped onto or over the rocks and logs he came across. His muscles should have been burning after sprinting for an hour without stopping except to change directions, but his quick rate of regeneration allowed him to continue. There's got to be a better way to get faster, Kyuubi thought. I'll have to stop soon. This body is running out of energy. It's a good thing I feed it more than just ramen. Those rabbits were good, but this takes too long. I won't be able to hide my presence forever. But the only way I see of safely using my power is through ninja means, which I need to learn from ninja, which means I have to stay here and do missions and crap. It's fortunate that I do not require sleep. One more length and I'll go find some meat. Maybe a deer, if I can find one. Then Kyuubi heard a voice. And if I cannot complete all 500 laps around Konoha, I shall do 500 push-ups. What on earth? Kyuubi went to see who was so vibrantly enthusiastic. He stopped at the edge of the forest. He saw an older man and a boy he recognized as one of the graduates from last year, both dressed in what appeared to be green leotards. Kyuubi rolled his eyes. 500 laps? They are either crazy or dead serious about training. Can you tell the difference the weights have made in your training, Lee? You burned brightly with the flames of youth. Of course you have. And once we increase them for the third time, I will teach you an awesome technique. Thank you, Guy-sensei. What is this technique you speak of? I must know. I will tell you when. The two ran out of Kyuubi's hearing. Weights. That's it. If I train with weights, I can improve in less time. But what could I use as weights? Kyuubi thought about different things he could do for weights while he hunted for food. I'll eat anything other than ramen. Kyuubi returned to Naruto's house just before sunset. He knew that even if he didn't sleep, this body needed at least short periods of inactivity. He watched the sun go down, slowly sinking below the horizon. In the end, the only way Kyuubi had thought he could get something small enough and heavy enough to use would be to get weights designed for training purposes. But Naruto was poor, and there was no way he could afford to buy them. And I need better clothes than this fluorescent orange outfit. And I don't want to ask for things. I can't take a chance of being caught. Who'd have thought? Kyuubi no Kitsune, hiding from mere mortals. But then, since my life is tied to this body by that accursed seal, that makes me mortal as well. I guess I'll have to steal. But I can't exactly steal clothing and wear it in broad daylight. I'm going to have to steal money and buy clothing. And the weights, I can't have questions asked about them if anyone notices them. This could be difficult in a village of ninja. And I don't know of any nearby towns. Kuso. Kyuubi dressed in the only dark clothing Naruto had ever owned, navy sweatpants and a black t-shirt. He used a ninjutsu made specifically for hiding in the dark. It was the third and last technique Naruto had learned from the Forbidden Scroll. Though it was meant for hiding, it would serve to camouflage him for his nighttime raid. He formed the seals and molded his chakra. Light absorption technique, Kyuubi remembered. His skin, hair, nails, and every part of his body turned black. Despite the seemingly illusory effect, it was indeed classified as ninjutsu. Kyuubi knew why. It requires hand seals, unlike genjutsu. And it causes the body to absorb light, thus turning this body black. Because it isn't genjutsu, it isn't easily detected. No one would you be looking for ninjutsu, because those aren't normally used for stealth. It was dark enough now. Kyuubi opened the only functioning window in Naruto's house, and was about to jump out, when he realized something. He didn't know where he should steal from. He needed to steal money. A bank would have money, but would be heavily guarded. I guess I'll just rob several stores. Kyuubi mentally reviewed the Nibi stores. Which ones would he have time to hit? And grin spread across Kyuubi's face. He formed a seal. Shadow replication technique. 5 clones came into being. Kyuubi used the light absorption technique on each of them, and outlined his plan. The clones nodded, then jumped out the window. Kyuubi followed suit. Although he could hear the clones leaping towards their targets, he was unable to see them. They would be invisible, or nearly so, as long as they stayed away from lights. Kyuubi ran to his own destination, which would be slightly harder to rob than where any of the clones were bound. They were going to rob a grocery store, 2 convenience stores, and 2 clothing stores. He would be robbing a jeweler's. He landed on the ground beside a toy store. On the other side of the store was the jeweler's. He couldn't risk making too much noise by jumping around over there. He snuck around back, and saw 2 Chunin standing guard at the back door. Of course they would have ninja guarding it. This is a ninja village. I thought my only problem would be patrolling ninja, but what can I do now? Is there anyone guarding the front door? Kyuubi slunk back around the toy store, and peeked around the front corner. A single Chunin stood under a street light. That won't work. I can't get caught in any light. Guess I'll have to work around the 2 in the back. Kyuubi crept back around the toy store. He heard the Chunin talking in low voices. He couldn't fight them. Without any of his powers, he'd be outmatched in seconds. With the fraction of his powers he had available, he would glow and be recognized. Besides, a fight of any length would almost certainly be loud, and the Chunin could call for backup. If he could get them away for just a minute or 2, he might be able to pick the lock on the back door or something. But how could he get them to move? They weren't Chunin for nothing. Kyuubi thought for a moment. Then, he had an idea. Kyuubi waited patiently for the clones to get into position. Once the Chunin left their posts, he would have limited time to get the cash before the clones were dispatched. He peeked into his front pocket. Good, I have that navy cloth bag with me. There's no knowing how much money there could be in a jewelry store. And any moment now. I can't believe I pulled guard duty here twice this week, Toru. I have stuff I had to do during the day, you know. The Chunin sighed as he continued to lean against the wall. Oh well, at least we can talk to each other, Ichigo. The guy out front is probably bored out of his mind, the second Chunin replied. It's easy money, though, it's not like anything ever. He was interrupted by a clang that could only be kunai colliding in midair. He and his partner rushed out into the street where the noise had come from. They saw 4 Konoha Chunins fighting furiously against 6 enemies, who didn't seem to be wearing forehead protectors. None of the nin seemed able to hit each other. The guard from the front of the store came around the corner. He looked at the other 2. All 3 nodded simultaneously and joined the fray. Kyuubi tried to open the back door. Locked. How on earth would he be able to open the door quietly? His clones weren't making much noise because they couldn't hit each other. Then he saw it. Fire regulations required that all exit doors open outwards. Therefore, the hinges were in the outside. He put the tip of his kunai under the bolt of the hinge, trying to use it as a lever to force the bolt up. Just before Kyuubi gave up, the bolt jerked up about an inch. Kyuubi pulled the bolt out, and repeated the process on the other 2 hinges. He caught the door as it began to fall backwards, and set it gently onto the ground. The last thing he needed was for the heavy metal door to give him away after he had gone to all of this trouble. He snuck into the shop. Toru threw a kunai at an enemy nin, who easily dodged it. It seemed that the only purpose kunai now possessed was to distract good ninja or injure the incompetent. He followed it up with 2 more. He saw the guard from the front throw a kunai at the same ninja. With any luck, it wouldn't be noticed. But luck wasn't with them. A second enemy nin deflected the third kunai with his own. This might take longer than I had hoped, thought the Toru as he dodged a spray of kunai. After searching for far longer than he thought wise, Kyuubi finally found the safe. It had been disguised as a trash can behind the counter. Seeing that it was the cheap kind with the plastic combination wheel, he punched through said wheel and grabbed as much cash as he could lay hands on. He stuffed what he could into his pockets, and put the rest into the bag he had brought. If worst came to worst, he could abandon the bag, and still get away with a good sum of money. Especially since he saw the large denominations of the bills. This was, of course, a jewelry store. Once he finished, he carefully placed the safe back where it had been. If he was careful, and if the clones held out long enough, he could also replace the door, and his theft wouldn't be discovered until much later. Kyuubi hurried to the back door. He should have checked the place out before, but it hadn't occurred to him. He was a demon, who should have been able to just blast the village to hell, instead of sneaking around at night to get supplies. He picked up the door and placed it back into the doorframe. Now was the real problem. How to quietly get the bolts back into place. Ichigo saw that the enemy nin had no visible forehead protectors. They were probably on an undercover mission when they were spotted by these other Chunin. Oddly enough, I don't recognize any of the Chunin, but then, there are a lot of us. Although his enemies seemed to work well as a team, they were reduced mostly to dodging kunai and dancing away from the Konoha ninja. They hardly got a single attack off after the guards had intervened. Ichigo saw that the nin seemed unnaturally afraid of being hit. He saw numerous openings made by the other Konoha Chunin that these nin could have exploited by taking a punch or two, but the anonymous ninja refused to take any action which put themselves in harm's way. What cowards! But perhaps it is a trick to wear us out. Perhaps they have great endurance. But as quiet as the fight is, surely someone will notice and show up. His musing was proven true when a Konoha Junin showed up. Ichigo recognized him, but couldn't think of a name. The Junin stayed out of the sight of the enemy nin, until he suddenly leapt out of the shadow of a nearby building, flinging kunai at 3 ninja. 2 of the nin dodged the kunai, but the third was just a hair slow, and was grazed across the arm. This shouldn't have been a big deal, but Ichigo was startled when he saw the nin vanish in a puff of smoke. He looked at the ground where the nin had been. Sure enough, there were footprints. A bunshin couldn't make footprints. Unless it was an advanced form. With a start, he realized that any bunshin of that caliber would be at least Junin level. With the clone's demise, the other 5 nin sprang into attack. But curiously, they jumped past the unknown Konoha Chunin to attack the guards and the Junin. 2 went for the Junin, while each Chunin was faced with 1. They nin emptied their kunai pouches at them in mid-jump and prepared to fight hand-to-hand. The Junin threw 2 well-aimed kunai at his assailants and dodged the kunai thrown at him. Because they were in the air, they had no chance of dodging the kunai aimed for the center of their bodies. The kunai sunk deep into their chests. Then the nin promptly disappeared in puffs of smoke. The Junin smirked. Just as I thought. Confident that the remaining 7 Chunin would handle the last 3 attackers, the Junin listened for the real perpetrator. The clones were obviously a diversion for something else in the vicinity. Then he felt something strange. A genjutsu. It's in the jewelry store. No, just behind it. The Junin began to run in that direction, only to stop after a few steps. What is the meaning of this? He shouted. Kyubi was at a loss for how to replace the bolts. He couldn't hammer them into place. Suddenly he heard the characteristic poof of a clone being dispelled. He needed to hurry. Thinking quickly, he decided to just shove the bolts as far in as he could, and hope no one noticed. He heard another 2 poofs in quick succession. Kuso. Another ninja must have shown up. He crammed the second bolt into the hinge. He heard a voice cry, "What is the meaning of this?" He realized that his fake Konoha nin must have interfered with what sounded to be an older ninja. The voice sounded older than the Chunin he had heard. It probably belonged to a Junin. But he had specifically ordered the clones not to interfere unless. Kuso. I've been discovered. That guy must be a Junin for sure. Why does this have to happen to me? Kyubi decided not to think about the obvious reason having to do with his robbing a jewelry store. The Junin was confused and angry. These Chunin had gotten in his way, and were staring at him while the other Chunin fought were surely clones. And why did the clones pass these Chunin too? They're clones too. The Junin saw the Konoha Chunin pull out their kunai. Am I going to have to fight all 4 of them? Suddenly 3 kunai flew from the right, hitting 3 clones. The real Chunin had finished with the clones, since one hit dispelled them. That left one very lonely clone, who threw his remaining kunai and crouched in preparation for the inevitable attack. The Junin dodged the poorly aimed kunai and attacked. He swung his leg for a roundhouse kick. Even if the clone blocked it, it would dispelled. To the Junin's surprise and dismay, the clone's creator was apparently a flexible person, since the clone bent backwards nearly to the ground, picked up a kunai behind him, and stabbed it deep into back of the Junin's thigh. The Junin grunted in pain, but followed through with a quick punch which dispelled the last clone. The Junin walked quickly to the Chunin, who seemed winded and sporting various shallow cuts, but relatively unharmed, and knocked each of them roughly in the chest. Good, none of them are clones. You, Chunin, stay here and be on the lookout for any more threats. With that, he sprinted as fast as his injury permitted towards the back of the store. Kyubi rammed the last bolt halfway into the hinge. That will have to be good enough. I need to leave quickly. He heard 3 poofs. Make that very quickly. Kyubi took off down the back alley. He needed to move quickly and stealthily, so that meant taking the alley that ran behind all of the stores. But if someone from the fight looked back here, they would see him. He heard a final poof, and then he heard the sound of someone with a slight limp sprinting after him. As he rounded the corner, he glanced back, and since his pursuer was dressed differently than the Chunin he had seen, he realized that it must be the late ninja, whom he assumed was a Junin. Kuso. Now I'll have to lose him in the village or the forest. But how could he have detected me? Kyubi thought for a moment as he ran towards the nearest edge of the forest. The genjutsu. Of course, I was smart enough to use ninjutsu to hide, but forgot to remove the genjutsu I already had. Kyubi quickly disabled the genjutsu and jumped onto a rooftop, and then into the forest. The Junin ran as fast as he could while trying not to worsen the injury on his leg. He could run, but it was painful with a kunai sticking in his hamstrings. Although he knew that running with it in would make the injury a bit worse, running after pulling it out would make him bleed to death. So he could run at about 75 of his normal speed. It wasn't fast enough to catch up to the ninja, but it was enough to keep him from getting away. Soon he noticed that it was incredibly hard to see the ninja, and the genjutsu that had alerted him to the nin's presence had apparently been removed. The nin had black hair, dark clothing, and appeared to have black paint or dye covering every inch of exposed skin. And it has to be paint or dye or something, because there is not a single black person anywhere in Naruto. How weird. Although his Junin training allowed him to see the nin anyway, he was annoyed at how difficult it was. He saw the nin run into the forest. Pulling out a stick, he set off a flare to alert others to his position in need of reinforcements. Then he followed the mysterious ninja into the forest. Kyubi was surprised when he noticed a flash of light behind him. He glanced back. A flare. Can't anything go right today? He was going to have to ditch the Junin before reinforcements arrived. As much as he had improved his speed, he knew that the Junin's injury was the only thing that kept him from catching up. If I can make several clones, then I might be able to escape. Yeah, then no. He caught me because of the genjutsu. I have to use it while I'm in the village. Kuso. I'm going to have to kill a Junin to keep this a secret. Ducking behind a tree, Kyuubi made 4 clones and used the light absorption technique on them so that they matched his appearance. He jumped into the higher branches, and sent 3 of the clones to attack while keeping the 4th behind to act as a decoy. He couldn't do this for much longer, since he was almost out of Naruto's chakra. And he couldn't risk using his own chakra without alerting every skilled ninja to the presence of his demonic chakra. Then he wouldn't be able to use it in front of anyone Veer again. Or worse, they might remember that Naruto had a demon sealed inside of him. They hated him enough as it was. He crouched on the branch as his clones attacked. I'm never going to catch up at this rate, thought the Junin. He kept pace with the nin, but every leap from one tree to the next made the kunai slice a little deeper into his leg. Already, he was forced to favor his right leg, which was bleeding around the kunai. He probably should have set off the flare and tried to do first aid on his leg, but he couldn't let such a potentially dangerous enemy leave unchallenged. He saw the nin duck behind a tree. Was the nin foolish enough to hope that he, a Junin, wouldn't notice that? 3 shapes that he assumed were clones leapt out and drew their kunai. Apparently not. The Junin saw a bit of movement behind the tree. The nin wasn't willing to risk himself. Or maybe he was waiting to launch sneak attack. He threw 3 kunai at each of the clones. They dodged easily and kept coming. The clones jumped at him, threw 2 kunai each, then drew a third. They held these in a way the Junin knew meant close combat. He dodged 5 of the kunai, but his injury prevented him from being the 6th, which stuck out of the bicep of his right arm. Great, now I can't use my good arm, and I'm going to be in close quarters. Drawing 2 kunai, he blocked 2 wild swings from 2 clones, and moved his head enough to avoid an attempt at stabbing his face. Spinning around, he faked a melee attack, then threw his kunai at 2 clones. One dodged, but the other, poof, ed into nothingness. I wasn't given the rank of Junin for nothing. He saw the real nin step out from behind the tree and begin throwing kunai. These were easily dodged, but it was becoming more and more difficult as the 2 remaining clones pressed their attack and as his leg and arm continued to bleed. He threw a single kunai at the real nin, and jumped backwards out of the reach of the 2 clones' ferocious attack. The kunai probably wouldn't even hit the nin, but it would stop him from throwing kunai for a few seconds. He perched on a high branch and began the seals for the grand fireball technique. Not only will it dispel the clones if they are too slow, it will alert any help to my location. He came to the last seal and brought his hand to his mouth. He took a deep breath, feeling the chakra gather in his lungs. Then he died. Kyuubi pulled the kunai out of the back of the Junin's head. The body fell to the ground 40 feet below. The Junin had been so intent on avoiding the clones and the thrown kunai that he had failed to think that the real nin might have also been a clone. Crap, I need to hide the body. But where? Kyuubi thought for a moment. He couldn't bury it. That would take too long and could be discovered. Maybe I could disguise it to look like something else. Mizuki's body. They never got rid of it. Something about not defiling our honor by burying a creator. I can cut up the body and hide it in with Mizuki's remains. The 2 clones who had been fighting picked up the body and ran with Naruto towards Mizuki's final resting place. The 3rd clone trailed a ways behind, making sure that they were not followed. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, but that is all we were able to determine. The Sandame sighed. Early this morning, he had been besieged with reports of robberies from all kinds of small stores. And then there was the matter of the jewelry store robbery, ending with 3 slightly wounded Chunin and a missing Junin. The Anbu had been able to find where the flare had been set off, and had rushed into the forest, following the trail of blood to a place where the trees had shown evidence of a battle. There was no clue as to who won, or what happened, but the Junin had not returned, and with the amount of blood they found on the trail, he probably would have died even if he had been victorious. But there was no body. They had followed a smaller trail of blood which led to Mizuki's corpse, and found several wild dogs eating there. They had assumed that the mysterious jewel robber had won, and the remains the dogs were eating were the Junins. They theorized that the body had been brought to Mizuki's corpse by the wild dogs, since that was now the apparent lair of this pack. Be on the lookout for any other attempts. I want double guards for the next 2 weeks at their assigned places, and 5 more Junins to patrol the streets. If there is any sign of trouble, use a flare immediately. We don't want to lose another ninja because he or she thinks they can handle it alone. Does everyone understand? The ninja in the room nodded. Good. And if anyone finds any evidence related to any of last night's thefts, bring it to my attention immediately. It could have been a coordinated strike, and there was only a disturbance at the jeweler's because of the guards. You are dismissed. The ninja filed out of the room. Kyuubi knew that Naruto was hated by the villagers, but he figured that they would at least take his money when he tried to buy something. I guess Naruto was fortunate that someone else bought his food. If Naruto had been left to buy food, he'd have starved. Kyuubi had planned to buy something before meeting his team this morning, but he had been thrown out of every clothing store he had tried to go in. And he hadn't dared to try and enter the store with the weights after seeing the glare the owner gave him. Kyuubi needed to buy the stuff himself to avoid raising suspicion, but no one would sell to him. Perhaps a henge, but no. Then they would think I stole it from whoever I hanged into. Kuso. Kyuubi mused about his activities this night as he walked to the training field, to which he was already an hour and a half late, since the villagers had been slow to give up on the chase. Some of them had obviously trained as ninja at some point. Things had gone downhill almost from the moment he had taken this body. He was once the fearsome Kyuubi no Kitsune, a demon so strong that the strongest ninja in existence had given his life merely to imprison him. Now he found out that he could hardly use enough of his power to beat ordinary ninja, and even then he could only use that much for a minute or two. After getting used to that, he had become a ninja to keep up his disguise as Naruto, for fear of being discovered. Since when was Kyuubi afraid? And once he had done that, he had been forced to steal to have any hope of becoming stronger. Now he was not only a pathetic human, and not only a ninja of a village he had tried to destroy, but now he was a thief. And his short career in thievery had led to his current status on the bottom of the social ladder, murderer. No one knew, but that had been due only to luck. He had overheard a conversation about the missing Junin. Not only had the Anbu found the trail to Mizuki's corpse, but they had recognized that that was where the body was. Only the presence of the wild dogs had kept the Anbu from investigating further. That was way too close. Kyuubi had eaten breakfast, despite Kakashi's warning. He had planned on shopping for a while, and he figured that he would be okay after taking time to shop. He walked into the clearing of the training field. He saw Sasuke and Sakura, but no sign of Kakashi. He stopped and sniffed the air. At least I didn't lose my senses when I got this body, Kyuubi thought. His enhanced sense of smell found no trace of Kakashi, nor did his sensitive ears detect anyone other than himself and the 2 genin. He walked over towards the 2. Where were you, Yubaka? You were supposed to have been here an hour and a half ago. Sakura screamed. Kyuubi wasn't fazed at all. Is Kakashi here yet? I finally got this voice down. It takes so much concentration to keep up, though. I shouldn't talk very much. Well, no, but. Kyuubi sat by one of the posts in the clearing. If Kakashi wasn't here by an hour and a half after they were supposed to meet, then he was either dead, delayed by important work, or chronically late. If he didn't have a good excuse, Kyuubi would plan on showing up at least an hour and a half late to every meeting Kakashi was coming to. For now, he just leaned back against the post and closed his eyes. He could feel Sakura looking at him. He checked the chakra of his genjutsu. It was as good as he could get it. His eyes were only a shade darker than Naruto's. Surely she hadn't noticed that. Kyuubi scowled. Maybe she was just weird. He let himself drift off to sleep since there was nothing to do. Sakura stared at Naruto. He had changed so much from when she had first met him. She remembered when he was a prankster, always smiling, always laughing, always shouting about how he was going to be Hokage. No matter how many people made fun of him, he always did whatever he felt like. Like wearing bright orange clothes. Sakura had never understood why Naruto liked orange so much. She knew very little about Naruto, but she knew enough to be aware that his food and clothing had always been bought by the Hokage, because he had no parents. She wondered how he expected to be a good ninja when his clothing was such a garish color. Without even thinking about it, she voiced her question out loud. Why do you always wear orange clothes, Naruto? Naruto didn't answer. Looking a little closer, Sakura realized that he was asleep. She could remember when he would have jumped at the opportunity to talk to Sakura-chan. She still remembered the times he had shouted at her about how orange was a great color, and how ramen was the best food ever, and anything else he could think of. But slowly, his outbursts had become less and less frequent. She had thought that he was getting a little common sense. But he had also begun to sleep in class. And he talked to people less and less, until it was rare to hear his voice. In fact, the only times she could recall him talking within the last year, was when he had either gotten in trouble, or been asked a question. And even then, his voice was quiet, and his replies were short. Sakura shook off the weight that seemed to have settled on her shoulders. At least now Naruto didn't interrupt her when she talked with Sasuke-kun. Sasuke-kun. Now that she thought of it, Naruto was a lot like Sasuke-kun now. Except Sasuke didn't sleep as much. Maybe Naruto has gotten himself a good role model, Sakura thought. And such a handsome one, too. Kakashi walked into the clearing, a full 2 hours late. The team was exactly as he had thought it would be. Sasuke was brooding, Sakura was staring at Sasuke, and Naruto was sleeping. Could I have possibly gotten a worse team? I have a loner, a fangirl, and a bum. Just great. Sakura jumped to her feet when she heard Kakashi arrive. You're 2 hours late. What's wrong with you? Oh, I was on my way here, when I noticed an elderly lady trying to cross the street. Liar. Kyuubi was awakened by Sakura's screaming. Is she always this loud? He wondered. He had only been around her twice since being assigned to her team, and both times she had woken him with shouting of a volume that could wake the dead. Seeing that Kakashi had arrived, and that everyone else was now standing, Kyuubi got up. I'm glad you're all here. Today, we will be doing a survival test. But Kakashi-sensei, we did lots of those in the academy, Sakura whined. But this one will be harder. And if you fail, you will be sent back to the academy. What? Kakashi waited until his ears stopped ringing. Yes, don't be surprised. The final examination you took tested your ability to use techniques. This test will determine your ability to use them in a combat situation. Your goal, he pulled out 2 bells, each attached to a string, and put the ends of the strings into his belt. Is to get a bell by noon, using any means necessary. Those who get a bell will pass. Those who do not will be sent back to the academy. But sensei, there are only 2 bells, Sakura noted. Yes, so at least one of you will be going back to the academy. Kakashi pulled out an alarm clock, who knows where he had been keeping it, and set it on one of the 3 posts in the clearing. This clock will go off at noon. Now try and get the bells, starting now. Sasuke and Sakura each immediately leapt into the forest to hide. Kyuubi just stood where he was and stared absently at Kakashi. Kakashi is a Junin. We are Genin. Barely. I might be able to get a bell if I use my power, but there has to be a trick to this. Not one of us, in theory, should be able to even touch him. Not one of us. Ah, this is supposed to build teamwork. Then why are there only 2 bells? Of course. That is to try and keep us from using teamwork. I see it now. But how can I convince the other 2 to work with me? Kakashi waited for Naruto to go hide. But he didn't. He just stood there, staring at him. What a weird kid. Maybe he's too lazy or too sleepy to hide. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Kakashi pulled out his favorite book, Icha Icha Paradise. He read for a little while. Isn't Naruto going to do anything? He's still staring at me. Kakashi faced away from Naruto and kept reading. He could feel the boy's gaze burning into the back of his head. He turned around, and sure enough, Naruto was still staring. I won't let a creepy genin freak me out. And what's up with his eyes? I think there's something wrong with them. Kyuubi came out of his thoughts with a start when he realized Kakashi was scrutinizing his eyes. Kakashi was 10 feet away, but if he noticed the genjutsu. Kyuubi sprang into the forest to find the other genin. There's definitely something up with his eyes. It's almost like a genjutsu. But I don't think Naruto can even do a genjutsu. How weird. Sensing something behind him, Kakashi whirled around and caught a kunai between his index finger and his middle finger. Hello there, Sasuke. Kyuubi found Sakura easily, since her red outfit was only slightly less noticeable than his orange one. Hey, Sakura, he whispered. Sakura spun to face him, holding a kunai. Oh, it's just you, she whispered back. Sakura, this is supposed to be a teamwork exercise. We need to work together with Sasuke to get the bells. But Kakashi-sensei said. Forget what he said, Kyuubi hissed. That was just to make it less obvious. Sakura thought for a moment. Yeah, he's right. Why didn't I see that? They heard a disturbance back towards the clearing. They nodded and crept back toward the clearing to see what was happening. Sasuke scowled at Kakashi as the Junin towered over him, smirking. Not only was Kakashi taller than Sasuke by at least a foot, but Sasuke had been buried up to his chin. Kakashi pulled his book back out and resumed reading. That had been more fun than he had thought. The boy was obviously talented, but talent wasn't important in this exercise. Kyuubi and Sakura saw Kakashi standing next to Sasuke's head. Kyuubi slapped a hand over Sakura's mouth just in time to prevent a loud, "Sasuke-kun," from giving away their position. After shooting Kyuubi a dirty look, Sakura realized why he had done that. Being the smartest kunoichi in her class, she came up with a plan to get Sasuke and then have all three of them attack Kakashi. She quickly whispered the plan to Kyuubi, who made a few suggestions of his own, while still trying to speak as little as possible. Once they settled the plan, Kyuubi nodded and snuck to the designated location. Once he was in place, Sakura struck. Kakashi wondered what had happened to the other two genin. Maybe they had decided to leave. At any rate, he would wait until noon just to be sure. He continued to read his book, smirking when he heard Sasuke resume his attempt to wriggle out of the ground. "Sasuke-kun, Sasuke-kun, are you alright?" Sakura burst from the edge of the forest, running towards Sasuke. Kakashi rolled his eyes. Had he seen that coming, or had he seen that coming? He walked towards Sakura, who was frantically trying to dig Sasuke out. Feeling a presence behind him, Kakashi dodged to the side and turned around. Naruto stood where Kakashi had been not even a second ago. Kakashi smirked. The boy had obviously hoped to use Sakura's outburst too. Kakashi dodged to the side to avoid a kunai from Sakura, then again to avoid one of Naruto's. Kakashi's eyes widened. Sakura only faked her outburst. Or did she just see an opportunity arise while digging? Kakashi backed up to the edge of the forest, looking at the three genin in the middle of the clearing. Naruto and Sakura finished digging out Sasuke, and then they began whispering amongst themselves. Kakashi smiled. Maybe they got the teamwork part of it, but they're still standing out in the open. Time to dodge. Kakashi moved out of the way just as a kunai whizzed past him from behind. He turned to see where it had come from. He jumped out of the way of the kunai the three genin began throwing his way. A kunai trap, perhaps? His instincts suddenly screamed for him to move, and Kakashi dodged to the side to avoid a kunai thrown from a different side. How many traps did they set up? Or maybe one of them is a bunchin, to allow the third to throw kunai from the forest. Kakashi considered opening his Sharingan to see for sure, but decided against it. They're just genin. I can't go that hard on them. Suddenly the three genin in the clearing began throwing lots of kunai, and at least twice as many as they were throwing began flying out of the forest. Kakashi dodged around, working his way towards the genin in the middle. He knew that at least two of them were real, since normal replications had no physical substance, and therefore couldn't dig up Sasuke, whom he knew was real. Suddenly Naruto ran from his spot in the clearing straight at Kakashi. Kakashi smirked. This kid has no idea what he's in for. I'll just dodge to the side, and Kakashi suddenly realized that the genin were no longer aiming for him, but were throwing their kunai just around Naruto, to keep Kakashi from dodging. Looking back, he noticed that the kunai from directly behind him were the only ones not hemming him in towards Naruto. Those kunai were coming straight at him, and he couldn't dodge them. Naruto is going to hate me for this, Kakashi thought. He grabbed Naruto by the arm, swung him around, and used him as a shield for the kunai behind him. To Kakashi's great surprise, Naruto disappeared in cloud of smoke just before the kunai hit, allowing 5 of them to plant themselves into Kakashi's chest. Stunned by Naruto's disappearance and the pain of having several kunai stuck in his torso, Kakashi failed to notice Sasuke coming up behind him until the last moment. He turned and blocked Sasuke's punch and the following kick, when he felt a slight tug on his belt. Looking down, he saw that the bells were gone. Sakura giggled, tossed a bell to Naruto, who had just come out of the forest. She was sure that this was a teamwork exercise by now, and so was not worried about Sasuke failing. Sasuke stopped his attack and waited quietly. Kakashi stood, amazed at the work of these three genin. You guys apparently figured out the real purpose of this test, and I guess you pass. We'll meet here at 8 o'clock in 2 days. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go see a doctor." With that, Kakashi vanished in a poof of smoke. Sakura ran over to Sasuke. "Great job, Sasuke. Hey, do you want to go to lunch with me to celebrate?" "No." "Well, okay then. Naruto, I guess we could." She turned and noticed that Naruto wasn't even there. Where'd he go? She jogged to catch up with Sasuke, who had started down the path back to Konoha. "Can I walk back with you, at least, Sasuke?" "Whatever." Sakura giggled. Kyuubi jumped from tree to tree, heading back to his normal training area. Although Team 7 had passed the test, Kyuubi could tell that Kakashi had been holding back. The only technique the Junin had used was whatever had buried Sasuke. Other than that, Kakashi had only used taijutsu. "I need to get stronger. I need to be able to defend myself against these humans, because if I am ever found out." He arrived at the training area, stopping in front of the posts that seemed to be in every area. "And I still need to buy those weights and that clothing. But no one will sell to me. I need to find a way." Kyuubi began sprinting to the east edge of the field. If he couldn't use weights yet, then he would just have to run faster. Naruto opened his eyes. It was dark, but he could faintly see the outlines of a hallway lined with doors. Naruto stood up, wiping off the muck that had been on the floor. "Just great. Where am I?" Naruto looked around. He didn't recognize this place, though it seemed strangely familiar. Then he noticed a light up ahead. Or, rather, a dim orange glow. "Is there a fire in here? I don't smell anything." Naruto walked towards the light, which came from around the corner at one end of the hall. The other end was so far away as to be out of sight in this darkness. Naruto pressed himself against the wall and looked around the corner. There was a huge room, which was mostly filled by an almost equally large cage. Inside the cage, Naruto saw a large, glowing figure. He had only seen a painting of it once, in an old history book. He had looked in the book a long time ago, when he was still an obnoxious kid. He only looked because it was in the forbidden part of the library. The caption of the picture had read, "Kyuubi no Kitsune." Naruto stared at the giant nine-tailed fox. It seemed to be occupied with something. It stared towards the ceiling, almost like it was looking past it. A long trail of chakra reached out of the cage and around another corner. Naruto stepped out into the open. The fox didn't react. Naruto followed the chakra around the corner. The chakra ended at a large chair, where it gathered in the seat. Naruto walked back to the room with the cage. The fox hadn't moved at all. Naruto looked at the ceiling. There was nothing on it. He looked back at the fox. It was still staring intently at the ceiling, completely ignoring him. Or maybe it just didn't notice him. Naruto looked back up. He tried to focus past the ceiling. He felt a strange sensation, like he was expanding beyond the walls of the place. The room vanished. He saw trees rushing past him. He saw his hands pump at his sides, and heard his ragged breathing. But he felt nothing. He wasn't trying to run. He tried to look down at his body, but his head wouldn't move. His body kept running until it reached a large tree. His hand reached out and touched the tree, and then his body turned and began running the other way. He could tell from the sound of his breathing that he should be dead tired. But he didn't feel tired. He could tell when he saw the trees move that he should feel a breeze. But he didn't. It was like something else was controlling his body. He tried to pull back into the place he had been before, and he felt a strange constriction, like he was being pushed into a box too small to fit him. Suddenly he was back in the giant room with the cage. He looked at the fox demon, Kyuubi. It still stared at the ceiling with the same intensity. Kyuubi is controlling the body. But if I'm not in my body, where am I? Naruto looked past the ceiling again. His body was still running. What was he to do? He didn't mind watching life this way. In fact, it might be preferable to actually living it. If something or someone showed up, and he didn't want to listen to their hurtful remarks, he could go back to the strange room. This is going to be really boring if all Kyuubi, at least, I think it's Kyuubi, does is run. Trees continued to rush by him. Naruto sighed. At least, he sighed as much as you can when you don't have a body, anyway. Kyuubi spun around, drawing a kunai. Someone was here, watching him. He had heard their breathing, but for some reason, he couldn't tell where it had come from. He sniffed the air. Nothing. He listened intently. Nothing. He couldn't sense anything, even with his enhanced senses. but a skilled ninja might be able to hide the signs of their presence. Why'd he stop all of a sudden? At the sound of the voice, Kyuubi dodged to the side and turned to face the other way. No one was there, and again, he couldn't tell where the sound had come from. "Who's there?" he asked the air. Silence settled over the training area. Kyuubi heard what sounded like a whistle, and hurled a kunai at the sound. A small bird, skewered by the blade, fell to the ground, guilty only of trying to sing. Kyuubi tensed his muscles, waiting for any hint of another presence. No one could stay silent forever. Naruto realized what was going on. He may not have been the brightest ninja, but he saw that every time he tried to make a sound, Kyuubi reacted. Maybe Kyuubi could hear him. He decided to test this theory. This is way better than dealing with the villagers. Naruto frowned, realizing that what he really wanted was to be friends with Kyuubi. It may be better than no friends, but a demon? Man, my life sucks. Hello, Kyuubi. Kyuubi flinched. How could anyone have figured it out? He looked around wildly, but saw no one. Can't you figure it out? Doesn't my voice sound familiar? It did sound somewhat familiar, but Kyuubi couldn't think of anyone. Who are you? He asked. Then it hit him. His voice is exactly the same as mine. Meaning, Naruto? In the flesh. Well, not really, but you get the picture. This could be useful, thought Kyuubi. Naruto can help me to act convincingly human. Unless he tries to take back control of the body. I have hardly any grip on my control at all, since I have to reach way out of the seal to get to the point of control. If he decides to take control, I will be trapped back there again. What can I say to convince him to leave the chair alone? Maybe, you do realize I can hear all of that, right? You can hear my thoughts? Yes. Then I guess all I can do is ask you to let me use your body? Yeah, so, can I? Kyuubi hoped for the impossible. Maybe this kid would go back into a coma or whatever. Maybe he would. Yeah, I like this arrangement better anyway. Did I hear you correctly? Kyuubi could hardly believe that he could have such good luck. Did you just say what I think you said? Yes, I did. Everyone hates me, so I don't really want to go out there anymore. Besides, you haven't done anything too bad yet, and it's been. How long have I been gone? 3 days. And before you ask, I can help you get your human act down, if you like. Not that I'm probably the best human to ask, but I can't really ask anyone else. Yeah, and Naruto? Is there any way that I can buy things? I need to buy some weights and clothing that isn't orange. What's wrong with orange? What do you mean, what's wrong with orange? Any competent ninja would be practically blinded by it before I could sneak up on them. Oh, how did you act when you tried to buy the stuff? Like any other customer. I tried to walk in, and the owners freaked out and told me to go away, so I told them to shove off, and they decided that warranted attacking me, and, yeah. That won't work. If anything, you basically need to grovel, and offer to pay extra. I've never actually bought anything but ramen, and I only bought that from Ichiraku. The owner there seemed to like me, so. Grovel. You expect the great demon, Kyuubi no Kitsune, to grovel for clothing and hunks of heavy metal. Yeah, unless you want me to try it. I could control the body and do it for you. Kyuubi considered that for a second. Would you be able to relinquish control of the body after doing that? I don't know. I don't really know how I got here in the first place. There's only one way to find out, though. Kyuubi thought about that. Was he willing to risk his only chance at freedom to spare his pride? It's not worth it. I can't. Then Kyuubi visualized himself groveling before filthy shopkeepers to be able to buy their goods at an inflated cost. Scratch that. We'll try it. It's a little afternoon right now. Why don't we go now? You'll need to go sit in that chair to control the body. What are we going to do about money, Kyuubi? I never had much, and certainly not enough to buy good weights and clothing. I've already got that taken care of. Just go sit in the chair before I start doubting my decision. Naruto returned to the room with the cage, which he now thought to be his mind. He walked around the corner to the chair. As he approached this time, the reddish-orange chakra pulled back. Naruto sat in the chair. Nothing happened. What is wrong? Why isn't anything happening? Then Naruto thought of something. He tried to focus past the ceiling. He experienced the strange feeling of expansion as he returned to the real world. Naruto sat up, rubbing his head. When Kyuubi had relinquished control, the body had fallen onto the ground and the head had hit a rock. Why am I thinking of my head as the head? Whatever. We need to work on that transition if we ever had to do that again, kid. If I can let you control the body again. Don't remind me. Now get moving. I have to train this body to avoid getting killed by any stupid ninja. Where's the money you were talking about? It's under the mattress of your bed. And maybe you should buy several different levels of weights, so that we can increase the weight as our body becomes stronger. Naruto smiled slightly. Maybe he would have a friend after all. Even if it was a demon. Naruto walked along as the morning sun shone from behind him. It felt weird to wander around Konoha now. Although he was still as alive as he had ever been, he felt more at home in the dark hallways of his mind than he did out here. It was hard to act normal. Especially after hearing about how he had gotten a 9-tailed demon fox sealed into him. Kyuubi had graciously explained how the whole thing happened, although he had refused to say anything about why he had attacked Konoha in the first place. Given all that had happened to him recently, that he was able to act normal was almost a miracle. Especially with Kyuubi talking to him while he walked. Like I was saying, kid, we need to get several different levels of weights, and a few black outfits, at least. That way we'll have a good chance of sneaking up on people when we're on missions. Yes, you've told me all this already. Once Naruto had figured out how to talk to Kyuubi from within his mind, it was not at all hard to learn how to do it while out here. And what's with the we? I think I'm going to be hanging out in that place most of the time, so. Yes, but if we ever need to act really convincingly human, you'll need to come out. And so you'll need to train also, so that we won't be sitting ducks whenever we are acting. And there may be other situations where we may have to switch places for a time. So it will be, we. Naruto walked through the streets of Konoha, looking for a good place to buy clothing. He knew where they would buy the weights, if the owner could be convinced to sell them. Seeing a likely store, Naruto walked towards it, but then remembered the scene that Kyuubi had made here yesterday. He would have to find another place to buy the clothing. Seeing another clothing store, he walked in. Hey, what do you think you're doing here, kid? Did I say you could come in? The store's owner yelled from behind the counter, startling the customers in line. I'm very sorry, sir. I only need to buy some clothing. I did not mean to disturb you. I am willing to pay extra for inconveniencing you. Kyuubi watched from his cage as Naruto apologized and groveled. It's a good thing I let him do the talking. I wouldn't let anyone talk to me that way. He continued to watch as Naruto bargained with the shopkeeper, who agreed to let him shop if Naruto would pay double price for everything. When the kid finally began looking through the racks of clothing, Kyuubi began pointing out the clothes that they wanted to buy. 3 pairs of those black pants. 2 pairs of black boots. 3 or 4 of those black long-sleeved shirts. Yes, everything needs to be black. No, I don't think we'll ever need to hide in anything that is a vibrant orange. No, I don't think orange would intimidate them. They would just think you're stupid. Get 2 pairs of those black leather gloves. And 2 black vests. And 3 of those black head coverings. I know they don't look like masks. You have to wrap them around your head. That way only your eyes show. That way you won't have to waste chakra on that jutsu I used to get the money. What jutsu? I'll tell you about it later. What? You dare accuse me of being a petty thief? And get 2 black cloaks while you're at it. No, they aren't terribly useful in a fight, but if it's wet or cold, you might need them. What do you mean by that? You don't even know what your mother sounded like. How could you know that I sound like her? Just go buy the stupid clothes. We've gotten everything we needed here, I think. Kyuubi remained quiet while Naruto bought the clothing. The shopkeeper glared daggers at Naruto, but wasn't going to pass up the profits from double pricing the clothes. Naruto placed the clothes on his bed. Now he was supposed to buy weights. At least Kyuubi hadn't tried to buy them yesterday. What do you mean by that, kid? Naruto almost laughed. He hadn't had any friends before, and Kyuubi wasn't the ideal type, and probably only cooperated because he was afraid of losing the body, but a friend was a friend. Naruto was happier than he could recall being in a long time. As he walked along the road, he mused on his former life. Everyone hated him. He couldn't blame them, really. They had lost so much to Kyuubi, and so when it was sealed in him, they just assumed that he was Kyuubi. He walked into the blacksmith shop to buy some weights. Kyuubi watched as Naruto groveled with the blacksmith. He watched as the blacksmith eventually agreed to make the weights, provided Naruto paid triple the price. The smith told Naruto to come back the next day for the first set, and a week after that for the rest of them. Naruto handed over the money and walked out of the shop. You didn't have to pay that much, Naruto. They were expensive enough as it was. He wouldn't have agreed to sell at all if I hadn't agreed to pay that much. Whatever. When they arrived back at Naruto's house, Naruto set the weights onto the bed. I'm not sure if I can do this, but here goes nothing. Naruto concentrated on returning to the darkened room. His bedroom became blurry, and he felt like he was being crushed by gravity, but with no pain. When his vision cleared, he found himself in the dark room, still sitting on the strange throne. He got up, and a mass of orange-red chakra moved to fill in the seat of the chair. He was back. Kyuubi withdrew back into the cage, and felt around the corner with his chakra. When Naruto rose from the chair, Kyuubi quickly took control. He filled the seat with his chakra, and looked beyond his prison, into the world of mortals. He was back. Kyuubi was pleased with the progress he had made in his training. Once he had picked up the first set of weights, he had begun using them immediately, and now the results were showing in his practice sessions with himself and his shadow clones. He had the extra weights at home, and it was about time to switch to the second set. Kyuubi was already about twice as fast as before. Granted, it was because he spent almost every waking hour performing techniques while sprinting through the forest, and he only had to let this body recuperate a few hours a day. The body's chakra capacity was improving, though not as fast as Kyuubi would have liked. And he was learning human customs from Naruto, who seemed almost pathetically nice to the demon. I guess he really was lonely. Kyuubi walked towards the Hokage's office to meet with his team. They were supposed to be getting another mission today. With any luck, it will be an easy one, like finding that stupid cat. Then I can get back to training. Before entering the office, he instinctively checked the genjutsu on his eyes. Still there, and it felt fine. Kyuubi walked into the office. Naruto, you're an hour late. Don't you care at all? Sakura screamed at him. Kyuubi looked around. Kakashi isn't here yet, so why is she getting so worked up? Females. About 15 minutes later, the door opened and Kakashi slouched into the room. Sorry guys, but there was an old lady who needed help carrying some groceries and… No, there wasn't. You lousy. Ahem. Sakura glanced over at the Hokage, who was looking at her with an amused smile. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. It's fine. Team 7, now that you are all here. The Sandaime glanced pointedly at Kakashi. I can give you your mission. Due to a lack of requests for missions lately, you will be getting a C-ranked mission. Sasuke smirked. Now I can test my skills against other ninja. Then I will know how much more I need to train to kill Itachi. Sakura smiled, happy to get a mission that didn't involve retrieving cats. Inner Sakura ranted on about impressing Sasuke. Kyuubi frowned. This probably means that the mission will take more than a few hours. I need to train. I need to be able to defend myself and stay alive. Sarutobi continued, you are to escort a man, Tazuna, to Wave Country. You will be protecting him from bandits and highwaymen. Once you arrive, you will continue to guard him until a project he is working on is complete. You will be protecting him from bandits and thugs while you are there. You may return once his project is complete, or after staying there for a month. Tazuna will be taking care of your meals. You will be leaving tomorrow morning. Dismissed. Team 7 waited by the gates for Tazuna. Even Kakashi had only been 5 minutes late. Kyuubi was unhappy about the mission. I need to train. At least we only have to worry about bandits and such. But it takes away from my training time. At least I can train on my speed and endurance while we're out there. Kyuubi felt himself to make sure that the second set of weights was firmly in place. Naruto had said that Kyuubi could train on speed and endurance by acting hyper and running around, because no one on the team knew about the weights. It would make him look silly, but at least he could train. He watched a man dressed in shabby clothes approach. The man was drinking from a bottle as he walked. He walked up to them, but instead of passing, he stopped. Are you guys ready to go? The man asked. Yes, Kakashi said. Let's go. Kyuubi frowned. We have to escort this guy? How on earth could he afford a C-ranked mission? Kyuubi followed behind Kakashi and the man who must be Tazuna. This was going to be a long mission. Kyuubi ran in circles around the group. He ran into the forest and back out. He jumped over Kakashi and Sasuke. After the first hour of this, Tazuna and the rest of Team 7 just ignored him. The dead last must be excited about the mission, thought Sasuke. They walked along, Kakashi and Tazuna talking about the project Tazuna was working on, a giant bridge. They passed a puddle. Kyuubi stopped. He smelled something. What is that smell? It smells like there was a person. No, 2 people here just a few minutes ago. And I smell metal, like the stuff they use in Kanai. Ninja? Maybe we aren't the only people out on a mission. Kyuubi ran to catch up with the group, splashing through the puddle in his hurry. Two shapes silently rose from the puddle. The first clutched his head and muttered curses. Then they both silently followed Team 7. Kyuubi was sprinting around and around the group, when he saw the two figures creeping up behind them. He ran towards Kakashi and whispered, "Two behind," before continuing to sprint around Team 7 like nothing was the matter. Kakashi was pleasantly surprised that Naruto had noticed the stalkers. Although Kakashi had noticed the puddle that should not have been there due to a lack of rain, he had not known exactly how many there were. Maybe Naruto isn't as shallow as I thought. Aren't you excited to be on a C-class mission, Sasuke? Sakura asked. Sasuke said nothing. Sakura pouted, while inner Sakura yelled that true love would conquer all barriers. Suddenly, two cloaked men appeared on either side of Kakashi and wrapped spiked chains around him. They both pulled, ripping the Junin into shreds. Then they charged at Tazuna and the two genin. Kyuubi was running around in the forest. Sasuke drew a kunai for each hand, and dropped into a crouch. The cloaked men flung their chains around the genin, hoping to catch them inside. Sakura grabbed Tazuna and got both of them out of the way, while Sasuke leapt straight at their assailants. The two men fought Sasuke for a while, dodging kunai and swinging their spiked chains and gauntlets. They couldn't touch Sasuke, but neither could Sasuke touch them. Suddenly Sasuke jumped back, rapidly forming seals. He put his hand to his mouth and blew a large fireball at the cloaked men. When he stopped, Sasuke saw nothing but scorched ground. The two men dropped from above him, landing on either side of him. Their chains were held ready. Sasuke braced himself for the end. Then he saw a crowd of Narutos pour out of the forest from every direction. The men flung their chains out to intercept the attack, but there were too many to stop. Sasuke, seeing their distraction, stabbed them both in the back with his kunai. Then the men were knocked back into a large tree by flying punches by two Naruto clones. Before they could leave, they heard a chillingly cheerful voice say, "Did you just hurt Sasuke-kun?" Sakura wailed on the two men senseless until Kakashi stepped out of the trees and said, "That's enough, Sakura." "Kakashi-sensei, you're alive," Sakura squealed. "Obviously." Sakura face faulted. "You guys did well. Naruto, good job with the sneak attack. Sasuke, you took advantage of Naruto's attack very well. Sakura, you knocked them unconscious for us. Good job, everyone." Tazuna, Kakashi turned to face the sheepish bridge builder. "You have some explaining to do." Kakashi sighed. Yesterday, Tazuna had admitted, after a few glares, that he had known that there might be ninja after him, but that his village could not afford a Class B mission, so the deception had been necessary. Kakashi had decided to proceed with the mission, after Tazuna guilted him into it by saying that they could leave a poor old man to fend for himself if they wished. Kakashi sighed again. It was bad enough that they had to be on the lookout for ninja, but did Naruto plan to run around like a squirrel on speed for the entire mission? To be sure, it could possibly prevent an ambush. But more likely, Naruto would be ambushed while he sprinted around in the woods. Then again, Kakashi didn't want Naruto to go back to running in circles around the group. Not only was it annoying, but Naruto kicked up dust, so that there was always a cloud of dust around them. And it disturbed Tazuna, who thought that no normal kid should have that much energy. "Naruto," said boy rushed from the forest and stopped next to Kakashi. He fell into step with the Junin, asking, "What is it, Kakashi-sensei?" "Naruto, I know that this may be boring, and that you might have excess energy, but you need to contain yourself. We might need that energy should we run into any more ninja." "But Kakashi-sensei." "No buts. Just stop." Kyuubi was pissed. Not only was he on an extra long mission where he might run into people who might be able to kill him, but he wasn't allowed to train, either. "You know, you sounded like a whiny brat back there." And he had to put up with sarcastic comments from his host, who seemed more cheerful than Kyuubi could remember. "I am a demon, not some human you can joke about. If I had my body, I would rip you limb from limb. There wouldn't be enough of you left to fill a jewelry box." Kyuubi and Naruto had gotten used to each other, more or less. Naruto would offer advice on human things, and pointed out things that Kyuubi may have overlooked. Kyuubi had never learned how to read emotions from tones and expressions, and, though he saw little point in it, agreed to listen to whatever advice Naruto thought of from time to time. They were working on a system to work together in combat. Kyuubi would pay attention to a single target, while Naruto would watch the surroundings from his vantage in his own mind. They had only tested it out once, during the short time they had engaged the Demon Brothers. And, for anyone who doesn't know, those were the two ninja from the last chapter. It seemed to work okay, but they would keep training if they ever got the chance. When there was nothing to do, as seemed to happen often on this mission, Naruto would tease Kyuubi, who would respond with venom. This seemed to amuse Naruto, who would continue teasing. Kyuubi didn't actually mind Naruto so much, and usually responded only to try and defend his dignity as a powerful demon. But you don't have a body, do you? You have to borrow mine. Step inside my cage, and then we'll see if you still have your annoying sense of humor. Actually, I'm just fine from out here. Get down. Kyuubi crouched low to the ground as a huge sword flew overhead and embedded itself into a tree on the other side of the clearing. A man jumped onto the sword. He was dressed in light blue, baggy pants, dark brown shoes, and wrapping around his hands and lower face. Kakashi was fully alert, though he didn't betray his anxiety on the outside. Zabuza, demon of the mist. The genin and Tazuna stood up. Who's Zabuza? Sakura asked. He's a missing nin from the hidden mist. You three, guard Tazuna. I'll handle Zabuza. How noble. The great copy nin will protect his brats. Suddenly Zabuza appeared next to Tazuna. We're still not fast enough. We've been training this whole time and I can't even see him move. This whole time hasn't even been 2 weeks. Good grief. Try and protect them from this. Zabuza swung his sword, or tried to, only to discover that Kakashi was holding onto it. Sakura pulled Tazuna away while Sasuke and Kyuubi took positions around Kakashi and Zabuza. The genin watched in awe as the two fought, seemingly tireless. Zabuza kept swinging his mammoth sword like it had no weight, but Kakashi always dodged it like the sword was moving through molasses. Kakashi lashed out with kunai, which were either blocked with the sword or wasted on a water clone. Neither could land a good blow on the other. Suddenly, Zabuza leapt onto a tree branch. I'll let you go this time, but that bridge will not be built. If you continue, I won't go so easy on you next time. Zabuza rushed into the nearby forest. The group arrived at Tazuna's house without further incident, late the next evening. They ate with Tazuna, his daughter, Tsunami, and, for a time, her son, Inari. Inari stormed off in the middle of the meal, declaring that they were all going to die. After Sasuke refused to go for a walk with her, Sakura retired for the night. Sasuke went to bed soon after. Kyuubi went to his cot and listened to the sounds in the house. When he was sure that everyone was asleep, he snuck out of the house to train. Because he had missed out on training in the last 2 days, he decided to do things a little different. Fighting shadow clones while sprinting through the forest. It would have to be taijutsu only because the sound of techniques or the clang of kunai might have been heard back in the house. Kyuubi trained until the horizon began to light up. He hurried back to the house, and feigned sleep until Sasuke came to wake him. Hey Dobi, get up. We have to guard Tazuna at the bridge today. Kyuubi sprinted around the bridge. Sasuke had, in vain, tried to convince him to lie in hiding and watch for the Zabuza. In the end, Sasuke took it upon himself to watch around the shore, leaving Naruto to guard the edge of the bridge. Hours passed. The two genin ate lunch together in silence, before returning to their posts. A fog began to creep around the bridge. Sasuke thought nothing of it until he heard a man laughing right behind him. Kakashi can't protect you now, brat. Naruto was sprinting around the edge of the bridge in the mist when he heard someone land beside him, and saw a dark shape keeping pace with him as he ran. He stopped and faced the figure. I do not wish to hurt you, but Zabuza-san cannot allow this bridge to be finished. Sasuke spun around. There stood Zabuza, the demon of the mist. Kakashi was at Tazuna's house working with Sakura on some training exercise. Naruto was on the other end of the bridge. I can't lose to him, thought Sasuke. I must survive, so that I can avenge my clan. If I am to beat my brother, I have to be able to beat this guy. Zabuza formed a seal which Sasuke couldn't identify through the mist, and vanished. Sasuke whirled around. Nothing. He looked behind him. Nothing. Where is he? I can't let him catch me off guard. I have to be ready. But no matter where he looked, Sasuke could find no trace of the mist nin. This was going to be difficult. Kyuubi looked at the strange boy. Or is it a girl? The nin just stared back. Neither of them moved. The nin, Haku, tensed his muscles. At any moment, the boy would either spring to attack or to run away. If the boy ran away, that was fine. But if he attacked, then. Are you a boy or a girl? Haku flinched. Everywhere he went, people had the nerve to question his manliness. He would show up and knock people around, and no one ever asked, "How did you get so strong?" Or, "Where did you learn to do that?" It was always, "Are you really a man? Are you a boy or a girl?" He hated that. This kid was not getting away. Haku wasn't going to kill the boy, but he would make him suffer for asking such a dumb question. Kyuubi mentally smiled. The kid had been right. Of course I was right. I'm the human here. I would know. Kyuubi ignored the voices in his head for now. He had distracted the nin with his innocent-sounding jab, and now he could attack. Kyuubi lashed out with a spray of kunai. The nin, though distracted, dodged the projectiles at a speed Kyuubi could barely see. Oh, that can't be good. Kyuubi twisted around just in time to see the nin fling a handful of senbon in his direction from behind. Kyuubi dodged them, but with considerably less grace than the missed nin had shown. Kyuubi jumped at the nin, who almost lazily moved out of the way and stuck several of the needles into his back. The demon blocked out the pain, and the voice of the annoying human in the back of his mind. Kyuubi formed a familiar seal, and a dozen clones appeared. Immediately, they ran straight at the gender-impaired nin, each holding kunai in both hands. The nin fired senbon in a circle around himself, herself, dispelling all the clones before they could reach him, her. Kyuubi, who had not attacked, frowned. This could be harder than I had thought. Again ignoring the voice in his head, which was yelling about something, Kyuubi summoned another dozen clones to the battleground. These clones flung kunai from a range, but Haku dodged them with an eerie grace, and quickly dispatched all of them. Kyuubi realized that this opponent was fast. Apparently, the demon was not near where he needed to be in terms of speed. It was only when the nin charged at him, flinging senbon, that Naruto's voice registered in his mind. "You idiot, take off your weights." Sasuke panted for breath. Every time he thought he had gotten the upper hand, his target would dissolve into water. Just how many water clones could a guy make? Apparently a lot, thought Sasuke as he snatched kunai out of yet another melting clone. He had to salvage kunai from fallen clones and from the deck of the bridge, as he had run out a while ago. Sasuke had the distinct impression that Zabuza was playing with him. Sasuke dodged to the side, barely avoiding being chopped in half by that monstrous sword. He stabbed his assailant in the back, and was not surprised when it, too, dissolved into a puddle. Sasuke couldn't keep this up for much longer. As if he had read Sasuke's mind, Zabuza attacked anew, with 4 images of himself converging on Sasuke's position, one from every side. Sasuke threw his remaining 3 kunai at 3 of the images, and leapt into the air, hoping to get out of the range of the swords. One image was struck in the shoulder, and splattered onto the deck. But the other 3 jumped after him. Sasuke pulled out his only remaining weapon, his Fuma shuriken, and turned around, preparing to block the swords with it. Instead, another image, perhaps the real Zabuza, appeared behind him and slapped Sasuke across the bridge with the flat of his blade. Sasuke landed hard and rolled to the small wall at the edge of the bridge. He couldn't move his legs, and he couldn't move his arms without excruciating pain shooting through his back. He had no idea where his shuriken had landed. He could only watch as Zabuza walked toward him out of the mist, holding that massive sword on one shoulder. "I was holding out for your teacher to show up. I was really looking forward to a rematch. I thought our session here would attract his attention. But since it obviously didn't, perhaps your death will succeed where this pointless fight did not." Zabuza raised his sword. Sasuke braced for the end. Kyuubi was kicked across the bridge. He had been too surprised by Naruto's comment to react in time. How could I forget about the weights? Of course, I knew I should be faster than this. Kyuubi dropped his weights onto the ground by undoing the rope that held them on. He had specifically designed his weights so that he could take them all off by untying a single knot. That way, he could take them off in the middle of a fight. Like now. The weights landed with a loud metallic clanging, chipping bits of the concrete. Kyuubi suddenly realized that those weights had been heavy. He felt like he needed to grip the ground to keep from floating away. Pulling out a kunai, he charged at Haku. The mist nin dodged Kyuubi's slash, but only by inches and without the usual flourish. Kyuubi skimmed across the surface of the bridge, running after his gender-neutral opponent. Haku stopped and turned around. Now that he was out of the boy's reach, he needed to make a plan. Haku's train of thought was interrupted by a fist crushing his mask into his face. Haku fell back several feet. Then he remembered what Zabuza-san had said. If your opponent is tough, kill him. Otherwise we'll have to fight him again. Don't be so soft that you endanger our safety. Kyuubi saw the boy get up and form a strange seal, one that he did not recognize. Water from the bridge rose up and froze in long, flat sheets around him. Then he saw Haku jump into one of the mirror-like sheets of ice. Suddenly, every sheet around him showed an image of Haku. Kyuubi smirked, throwing the kunai into the mirror that Haku had entered. It shattered. But immediately, more water rose up and made another sheet of ice, complete with an image of Haku. Kyuubi saw all of the images raise hands full of senbon. The images threw the needles. Kyuubi saw needles fly from seemingly every direction. He knew that there could only be one of the nin, and he could occasionally make out a faint blur that must have been the nin. But it was too much to think about at the moment. Kyuubi covered his head as senbon rained down upon him. They kept coming and coming. Kyuubi realized from the chill spreading from the many needles embedded in him that they were made out of ice, which the nin probably made from the water around them. And since they were out on the ocean right now, Kyuubi began to grow tired. He didn't feel exhausted. He felt a peaceful sort of sleepiness. The needles didn't hurt as much. The edges of his vision began to darken. I wonder what's going on, Kyuubi mused. He didn't really care. He just wanted to sleep. Kyuubi, you're dying. Snap out of it. Oh, how nice. I guess that. What? Kyuubi forced as much of his own chakra into Naruto's body as the body could take for the few minutes he would need it. The sudden release of so much energy made the concrete of the bridge ripple and crack around his feet. Senbon popped out of his skin, and all of his wounds healed without so much as a mark to show their former existence. The genjutsu over his eyes broke, revealing the bloodshot eyes with slitted pupils and red-orange irises. The whisker marking on his cheeks lengthened and thickened, giving the impression of long claw marks across his face. Fiery, red-orange chakra enveloped his body. The chakra formed a vaguely fox-shaped silhouette around Naruto's body. Over each hand were claws made of chakra. Haku could only stare as the blonde boy suddenly healed. He could only stand there as the boy charged, screaming incoherently. He could only fall as the ferocious thing ripped out his throat. And he could only scream silently as the boy began to eat him alive. I was holding out for your teacher to show up. I was really looking forward to a rematch. I thought our session here would attract his attention. But since it obviously didn't, perhaps your death will succeed where this pointless fight did not. Zabuza raised his sword. Sasuke braced for the end. He heard a gasp of pain, but it sounded like it was coming from in front of him. Is this what death is like? Sasuke opened his eyes. In front of him stood Zabuza, still holding his sword above him. An arm stuck out from where his heart should have been. The hand glowed bright blue with chakra. Suddenly, the hand receded. Zabuza's now lifeless body collapsed to the ground. The monstrous sword fell to the side. And just behind Zabuza's body stood Hitaki Kakashi. Kakashi smiled his little smile, which you can only recognize from the way his eye looks. Sorry I'm late. For real, this time. I shouldn't have let you and Naruto guard the bridge by yourselves. Sasuke grunted in response. I need to go check on how Naruto's doing. Sakura will take care of you until I bring Naruto back here. Sasuke-kun, you're hurt. Sakura ran over and kneeled beside Sasuke, as Kakashi hurried to the end of the bridge. Sak groaned as Sakura began fussing over him. Must replenish energy. Must feed. Kyuubi tore into the still warm body of the fallen Haku. Kyuubi, stop. The demon ignored Naruto's request. Kyuubi, I know you might be a little shaken by your first real brush with death, but if someone sees you, they might figure out what's going on. Kyuubi froze. Slowly, his thoughts returned to normal. What if someone did see him? Kyuubi stood up and slowed the release of his chakra back to its normal level. He replaced the genjutsu over his eyes. He pulled his mask back over his face, as it had obviously been removed for eating. Then he sat down. I almost died. And if that kid hadn't reminded me, I might have been seen. and then I would be hunted by ninja, instead of just running into them on missions. You could say thank you. Thank you, Naruto. We should probably go check on Sasuke. Zabuza is at least as strong as this guy was. Yeah, I guess so. Kyuubi reluctantly got up and jogged over toward where Sasuke had been patrolling. Kakashi ran toward the end of the bridge. Zabuza would only have strong companions, and any ninja dumb enough to wear orange, at least, he used to wear orange, would be easy prey for a decent ninja. Then, Kakashi saw Naruto jogging his way. Naruto. The boy stopped. Kakashi looked at him. There was blood everywhere. Blood covered Naruto's black shirt, pants, and mask. It was dripping off of his chin and from his fingertips. Every step left a red print on the ground. Naruto's entire outfit was now a dark red. His clothing was torn, and had more than a dozen holes in various places. Naruto, are you alright? Kakashi rushed to make sure that Naruto would be alright. Surely, with this much blood lost, the boy should be about to pass out. I'm fine, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto replied in a gravelly voice. Kakashi sighed in relief. He had been afraid of losing a student on his very first mission as a sensei. Where is the nin you fought? Naruto pointed behind him. You didn't let him get away? Naruto shook his head in a negative manner. Very good, Naruto. Now let's see if we can't find out who was behind all this. Maybe there is a note on the ninja's body. If not, we can look at Zabuza's. You don't want to see the body, Kyuubi said. Because of the recent release of so much chakra, it was going to be more difficult to speak normally for a while. We have to find out who was behind this, or this mission will have to continue until the bridge is finished. Kyuubi grunted, but didn't argue. Kakashi began walking over in the direction Naruto had pointed. Come on, Naruto. Naruto followed slowly behind Kakashi, dreading what the Junin might discover. Sakura finished binding Sasuke's last open wound. How are you feeling, Sasuke-kun? She asked in a syrupy voice. Sasuke grunted in response. Sakura was about to speak when she heard many people walking toward her. She looked up and saw a short man in a black suit, leading a large crowd of armed men. The man stopped when he saw her through the slowly clearing mist, and the men stopped behind him. The man spoke. Well, what have we here? A girl and a wounded ninja? Ha, even if that stupid demon couldn't kill you, at least he weakened you for my men to finish off. He pointed at the people on his left. You men take care of these two. The rest of you, search the rest of the bridge. When you kill everyone there, plant the explosives. The men he had finished speaking to hurried toward the end of the bridge. The man in the black suit stood where he was, and spoke to the rest of his men, who were walking over to Sakura. Kill the boy, and do whatever you want with the girl. I want to see this. Kakashi stared in horror at the sight in front of him. Two wild dogs were busily eating the ninja's corpse. By the looks of it, they had already eaten the throat and the face, and were polishing off the right side of the body. Kyuubi silently vowed to be nice to every dog he ever met again. Naruto agreed. That's twice you've been saved by wild dogs. You owe them big time. Meanwhile, Kakashi was wondering how the dogs had gotten there. After another glance, he decided that there was not going to be anything salvageable from the ninja's body. He turned around and began walking the other way, when he heard Sakura scream. Kyuubi truned at the sound. But before Kakashi could sprint to Sakura's aid, a small crowd of armed men came into view from the thin wisps of mist still hanging over the bridge. You're not going anywhere, shouted one, and they all charged at Kakashi and Kyuubi. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.